If you've been on the old YouTube a while, you've heard the question, should the same person play the role of the product owner and the Scrum Master? Obviously, the answer is no. We're not going to talk about that today. If you're in this position, what can you bring to your management to convince them that this is not an optimal situation? And then how do you go about splitting these roles?
Yeah, so as always, tons and tons of value in this episode, just like all the other episodes. Don't forget to subscribe and like. We're going to do this differently this time.
Also, Io is back. Io is back. He may or may not be putting random fingers in the air that mean things. I don't know what fingers he's shooting at people. If only we had intro music as well to double down on. So let's get the textbook portion of this podcast out of the way right quick. Conflict of interest is going to be the first thing that you see. So let's read the one-line description of product owner and Scrum Master and get that out of the way, because this is probably the thing that I am least interested in discussing. So it says,
you got to read both lines.
The product owner is accountable for maximizing the value of the product resulting from the work of the Scrum team. Second line. The Scrum Master is accountable for establishing Scrum as defined in the Scrum Guide. They do this by helping everyone understand Scrum theory and practice, both within the Scrum team and the organization.
So it says that the product owner is accountable for the success of the product. It says the Scrum Master is accountable for the effectiveness of the Scrum team. So those are two different prerogatives. Right? I'm just saying, they're two different things. It's like saying, well, you have roles on the team. Let's say you have your linebacker and you have your quarterback. Can they both be the same person? That's what we're talking about, really. Different roles. Can they be done by the same person?
Those two are completely, I don't know, they're completely decoupled in my brain. I am representing the product owner / product manager in this podcast. I spent time with the development team working on solutions on the technical side of the house, so that when I flip over to the strategy and pricing and marketing side of the house, I can do a whole different job that the team needs me to do to promote and to move forward their product line, and they need me in that business. I don't ever think I've been in a workplace where they've asked the product owner to also do Scrum Master responsibilities.
I think it's always the other way around. You hire a Scrum Master and you expect him to also be the product owner. I don't know if I've seen the other way around. So I've actually been in such roles in the past where I've been hired as a Scrum Master, and then I'm acting as the product owner, the guy who's...
Did you know that going into the role, or did you get into the role and say, hey, you know a lot about product, why don't you help with this? And then suddenly, quote, helping is actually you doing the role full time.
In the last role, I did not know going in. I just assumed that I was going to be a Scrum Master.
Yeah.
And then found out that, oh yeah, we don't have a product owner for this particular, for your teams, not just teams. So you're just gonna have to wing it. But luckily I had a manager who kind of was in those meetings. So he's more of a subject matter expert. So he kind of acted as that, but I still had to bring those skill sets and those reports back to the team, because I'm the one working with the team. The manager's not working with the team. I'm providing high level discussions and, okay, here's what we've done and here's where we are to him. And then he's in that meeting with me being a subject matter expert saying, okay, based on what the team has done, here's the next steps, here's things like that. But yeah, acting in that capacity of being, yes, full-time Scrum Master, but then playing a role of Scrum Master, because I think the last one was more of infrastructure type stuff. So we were doing more back-end stuff, so they felt that, okay, because this is back-end stuff, there's not really much to demo to the user, so they didn't really need to hire a product, which in some ways I kind of agree, but I still have that being overburdened of...
Actually, that's how I got my start in product. I don't know if I ever told you that story or not. I got my start in product. I was a QA manager, and we had tons of back-end development tools. Back-end development tools to look up things in the database. Back-end development tools to investigate problems in logs. Back-end tools to aggregate all the logs together and show them in one dashboard. Back-end tools to interface with things and change things or whatever, delete records or things like that. We had tons of back-end tools that the development team had created just by being basically the only technical people in a small company. And at some point, like one of the C-level executives is like, look, that's enough. Like we have so many tools floating around that the developers, when they're working on their normal in sprint work, in pursuit of a sprint goal, they're like, well, I have to stop to go enhance this tool or to change this tool. And they were kind of doing this stuff on the DL.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They were kind of sneaking it in because it was something that the developers knew. And they're like, look, we need transparency. We have to have somebody who knows what the state of all these tools are, who can talk to all these tools and about what their purpose is and talk about the roadmap. Where are we going to be in 2 years? What kind of support tools do we have now? What do we need in the future? We need a product owner. They said product owner because this was not like all these tools were internal facing. So they didn't really think there was a marketing component. They didn't really think there was like a strategy component to this kind of stuff. That's why they called it product owner. We need someone to play the role part-time. And they happen to say, like, you're a manager. You should be able to take on an additional responsibility for the company because, you know, you got a bright future here, kid, you know, that kind of stuff. And they basically just, like, pointed at me and is like, hey, do you want to take on this extra responsibility? And that was my first product owner roles, internal tools that all the development teams would use. They're like, hey, build me a roadmap, figure out what we're going to work on. I actually was a product owner without a team. I had to go to the other product managers that had teams and ask them, hey, you seem to be intersecting with this functionality in your next sprint or two. Do you think you can ask your team to add this enhancement to my tool? And that's how I did anything. I didn't have a team. I could just be like, hey, they work for me full time and I'll just give them stuff to do. I had to go beg other product managers. You know what I mean? It was, I mean, like I would never want to work. I would never take that job again.
You work in a tool factory,
really agile,
right?
Though? Is that agile?
Well,
I think that's really agile.
It's fragile agile, but it's getting there, right? You're not there. At least somebody had the wherewithal to say, we're a tool factory, 26 tools and counting. So let's have someone.
I mean, from a meet them where they are perspective, from like an advanced agile coach, like trying to sell you their book or training or whatever, like, oh, buy my wares on the internet. Like, hey, at least the executives went out and said, look, we see that this is a tool set that we are developing in-house. We should have somebody, a single point of contact, wrap their arms around all the tools and put a roadmap together, even if we can't afford a team yet, and have them beg, borrow, and steal development time from other product managers. Like at least they're collaborating with other people to move their roadmap forward.
Interesting that you got into it that way.
Yeah.
Mine was slightly different.
Oh, really? Okay.
I was a Scrum Master at one of the several teams at this one place, and we had a really good product owner. I mean, she was a rock star, and then she took maternity. So they're like, well, we put a requisition out. We just can't find anybody as good as her. Yeah. So you're it. So this is very topical for me because one day I walk into work, I'm a Scrum Master and the PO. Yeah. That changed pretty quickly after that because I just didn't have enough hours in the day. And I wasn't servicing either side realistically in any way, shape, or form. But the Scrum Guide, just to wrap up that, really doesn't have much of a guidance on this, right? They just say role A, role B, what they're accountable for, and that's it.
Yeah, my critique of the Scrum Guide here is it says, hey, they're just roles. Like, these are not positions, they're roles. Anyone can, quote, play the role. I mean, you can find anybody with a podcast. They're going to have covered this. But then, like, developer is just another role in the Scrum Guide. But I would be interested to search those channels for people talking about Scrum Master and PO in a role. I'd be interested to see if they're saying the same thing about developers and Scrum Master or developers and POs. Like, PO being a role that developers do, I think would be an interesting podcast to talk about as well.
Are we saying there's a chance that a developer can play either of those other roles? Since it's not a position, it's not a job, it's a role within the Scrum team.
You never say never.
Can play,
but there's different skills roles involved, though, right? A product owner isn't simply just a backlog manager. Right? They're not simply just prioritizing the backlog. They're actually working with, if you don't have product managers, your product owner is also taking on some of those duties as well. So they have to interface with the customers. They have to figure out the strategy of the product constantly. They have to figure out the pricing, all of those things. And you could argue a developer could do that, but I'd say most developers aren't comfortable in those situations where they have to talk about pricing, they have to talk about marketing, work with sales, work with customers.
Yeah,
right?
anytime I see someone playing more than one role from the Scrum Guide to the Scrum team, I have to think, like, what are they dropping? What are they not doing? It sounds like you have some things in your day job, and now you're taking on a nighttime job. It sounds like you're working two jobs to me. That's, if I'm running a company, I want someone doing the best development job possible. The same thing when I think about product owner. I don't just want my product owner involved in writing good stories and having the BA skill set and stuff like that. I want them interfacing with sales. I want all the salespeople to know my product owner. I want my salespeople to trust my product people so much that they grab them and bring them into all their sales demos and presentations.
But bottom line, the company's the one that started this problem in the first place. They're trying to save money by saying, hey, I just hired this Scrum Master and I want him to be the product owner. So they're the ones that are causing this problem in the first place. Because
So to their defense, right, they may not know. They may not know the depth of what these roles actually entail, right? They may think, well, you're working with the team, aren't you? You're there working with the team, product owner. And Scrum Master, what do you do all day? You work with the team too. So why do we need two people to work with the teams?
When I see a development team member playing the role of a Scrum Master, I immediately envision somebody who is overburdened. Before we started the podcast, I talked to Om about when I was on contract one time, I was playing the role of multiple roles on the Scrum team. And I remember the contract, the point of contact for the contract, the delivery manager, whatever they're called. Yeah. The person who manages the contract at that organization, I remember them saying, like, we're willing to support you however you think the contract will be most effective. So if you need to basically point at people on the development team and say, you're now the product owner and you're now the Scrum Master, and then move yourself back up to a more executive coaching type of position. I figure somebody who's doing the product owner and Scrum Master role, they're probably overburdened. They're
definitely. Definitely overburdened.
Like, let's think about this for a second. Actually, what we didn't talk about up until this point, people doing this role that are like development leads. A lot of development leads get caught in the role of like, well, you are answerable to the product for the technical direction, which ends up basically being prioritization, right?
Right.
But then you're also answerable to all the development work, the actual in the weeds development work. So you end up basically playing both these roles, and you don't even know it because your organization doesn't hire a Scrum Master, and they don't really define clearly the product owner / manager. So you end up doing both of these. So if you're in that position, it would be great to back up a second and be like, well, actually, especially if you have multiple teams, to back up a second and say, well, actually, why don't I just pick people on the team, be like, you're the Scrum Master now, you are the product owner now, and then I'm going to play more of a collaborative coaching type of role where I help you connect to the business when you need the help. Otherwise, I'm going to trust that you can get the job done. And when you fail to get the job done, I'll step in. And when you scream for help to get the job done, I'll step in.
I think that's a really valid point, is that you, as this kind of coach, right, agile coach or consultant, you are the safety net for these people. So they know they can't fail, right? They can't fail hard because you're there to catch them. But the other side of it is, before you do that, I think you need to look at the teams and say, do they have the right kind of skill sets to carry out these roles? You may need to supplant those. So if you're a coach, maybe just have a couple of webinars or sessions with your team members and bring their skill sets up a little. Even though you're there to catch them, they're going to feel pretty vulnerable otherwise, right? It's like saying, well, a football team has a linebacker and a quarterback. Can one person do both?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Tom Brady that when I see him in Miami.
Isn't the business going to tell you, like, you're not excelling at any one job? Isn't that what the business is going to say?
That's exactly what the business is going to say, but they may not even know that you're not excelling, other than what they're going to look at is the metrics, they're going to look at the metrics, right? And then they're going to say, we're not getting this. We're also not getting this.
Right.
Who's on Who's on for that?
well,
It's this one guy
part of
or
being-
one person.
Like part of being overburdened is this reduction of accountability. If you're trying to play the role with one person, and management is trying to hold them accountable, saying, "Well, you know what, like the team's not really evolving and what," and then, but you're also flipping over to, well, also like the product is not really moving into the markets I want. Like those are two different conversations. Like I'm trying to say, it's difficult for management to hold one person accountable for both the team evolution, internal type stuff, and also the product on the market evolution. Hey. Well, welcome to Brian Ohm's software development company, IO. Okay, well, welcome. Thanks for being our new employee, IO. You're in charge for this specific thing for the business. That's why we hired you.
Yep.
You went through the hiring process. We told you all about this accountability. We showed it from all sides. We showed it from the good side, from the bad side. We exposed you all to all sides of it. This is your accountability now. Everybody in the business, we're directing to you about this one thing.
Yep.
Okay, so one thing though, not 15 things. You know what I mean? Not 3 things, not 6 things. Like how many things can we dump on you and say, hey, everybody from all around the business is going to ask you about this now, and they're all going to come to you. You know, like they're going to ask you about a half dozen things, potentially unrelated.
And that's where those 2 points come in: the being overburdened and the conflict of interest. Is like, okay, I'm supposed to be able to support the team and making sure they're delivering and the value and all that stuff. But at the same time, I'm supposed to support the business and making sure that the business, I'm getting all the right information from the business, I'm getting all the requirements, and I'm able to present back to the business what is there. And that's where those 2 points come in, because there's a conflict of, okay, who am I loyal to? Am I loyal to the team?
Who are you serving? Right.
Yeah. Am I loyal to the team or am I loyal to the business? Am I serving the team or am I serving the business? And then if I'm serving both, then that makes me feel overburdened. And is the company willing to pay that? Are we going to go back to the $1 million paycheck that what's the name, Andrew Carnegie was getting?
Well,
is that
I think
going to be able to pay that much these days?
But as a Scrum Master, one of the things you do is to coach up in the organization, right? So I think it behooves a Scrum Master, even if you're playing the role, when other responsibilities are thrust upon you, to elevate that. When you're coaching up, just say, look, I can do one thing really, really well, or I can do 2 things not so well, or I can do 15 things terribly.
Right.
What would you like me to do? Ask your executives that. With regard to startups, yes. So you could have multiple things, multiple hats, as is colloquially known, right? But then you have to make a decision for yourself. Is this worth it for you to be overburdened?
Right.
You know, looking at all these stock options that you got, which may or may not materialize. I can tell you as a former paper millionaire, I'm still sitting here. So anyway, that's a decision an individual has to make for themselves. But it still is within your role as a Scrum Master to elevate this topic that you're overburdened, right?
Well,
and
it's
guide your leadership toward
again,
the right solution.
So if you are at the point where I've got 10, if I got a food truck and I'm serving 10 customers, that's cool. I could be the cook, I could be the server, I could be all of that.
Sure.
But if I'm opening an Applebee's where I got 100 or 200 people coming in there, I can't be everything. So if you're small enough, that's fine. I could be everything.
Not according to the Scrum Guide.
Hey,
According to the Scrum Guide, you can do everything.
Remember, the Scrum Guide said it's a role. It's not a position. It's not a person. It's a role.
I understand.
So if that role can be accomplished by one person for one project that's small enough, that's fine. But when you're talking about, oh, I got to deliver this huge mansion or this huge shopping center, I can't be the electrician, the plumber, the bricklayer, the architect, and all of that.
I've never been in the position where I'm the product owner and the Scrum Master. However, I have been in the position where I'm the product owner role / product manager, and I'm the expert in the room with regard to anything they're going to talk about Scrum Master related. Because like I'm not only the company's first product hire, but I'm also the person in the company who has the most experience in agility.
Yes.
In Agile. So by default, people in the company are coming to me to ask me questions. So whereas I am not their Scrum Master, even their Scrum Master is coming to me, asking me basic questions and stuff like that, and I'm trying to help them. I, as a product person, I'm trying to justify a business case why they need to separate the role and make it an individual job, not just a role that someone does part time.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want it to be a part time thing, because I know this company may not have reached a maturity level to understand that they need this role full time. But I'm trying to evolve this product towards the future. I only want to kind of be consulted in these discussions to move them forward. I need somebody else to do all that. And you can have a business leader, maybe if you have a really talented, I don't know, director of operations or something like that, maybe they have the talent to do this kind of stuff. But I mean, if you're an Agile coach listening to this, like, hey,
there's one right here.
Congratulations, you have what it takes to run operations for a small to medium sized business. Because that's basically what Agile coaches do all day. They say, like, well, this team talks to this team in this manner, and this team operates back to the rest of the business in this manner. They talk about the way teams communicate with each other and the way teams are set up. And
So
I need someone
like
to be an
getting-
expert at all that.
So it seems like we're dangerously getting into a part where, at least to me, that we're talking about maybe the guys who made the update to the 2020 Scrum Guide were wrong by making these roles.
No, I don't think so. I think the updates were really a reaction to the objections.
I get the
from
whole updates, but I'm
previous
talking
one.
about that part of
But-
making these functions roles. Because if you're saying they're roles, that means anybody can do it.
That's
Yeah.
right. Anybody can do it, but should they do it?
That-
That's the
that-
question
but
we're
that-
asking,
that's the same
right,
thing.
on the podcast. So I think if you look at the essence of the Scrum Guide, it relates to a Scrum team.
Sure.
It doesn't say this is how you stamp out multiple Scrum teams and you scale up in a way that makes sense. There's none of that in the Scrum Guide. In fact, go search the Scrum Guide for the word scale.
I won't do it.
No, you shouldn't do it because you'd be very underwhelmed by the results, right? So, okay, it makes sense for people who are adopting Scrum from scratch, right? You have a team. Let's have that team look at the Scrum Guide, implement that to the letter T, and they will succeed. But then what happens next? What's next? And I think when we're talking about a single individual playing the role of the product owner and the Scrum Master at the same time, we've already possibly evolved beyond a single team. Possibly. Because the organization is looking at cutting costs or saving costs, right? They're saying, well, we don't need two people to do this. There comes a time when you look at that and say, one person can possibly do the job, but they won't do it very well, first of all. Why won't they do it very well? Because and we talked about how they're overburdened, right? How do you relay that messaging up to your management
Yeah.
or leadership if you have their ear? How do you say to them, listen, I'm one person. I can do both of these things, but I can't do a good job at either of those two things, right? So you have to find a way. Otherwise, what's going to happen is the onus is on you now to keep working, and they'll just
Yeah.
crack the whip harder. You're
No.
not working hard enough.
And that's exactly that's actually what usually happens.
right.
Well,
Because it's like they keep looking at you as, oh, you're failing at this one part. And that's exactly what happened to me at one of my previous positions. Like I was knocking it out as a Scrum Master. But then that BSA, which was pretty much just a product owner part, I sucked at it because I told him straight up, this is not who I am when I got started. So when I had one manager that hired me to say, okay, come on board, and fine, I get this is your skill set, I'm going to hire you for that skill set. And I did the whole transformation because they were doing like, twice a week daily Scrum. So we got a daily Scrum. We got to have retros because they were not even bothering with the retros. So
Sounds like it was a classic bait and switch.
so when you came in there and fine, you say, okay, this is the job I was hired for, and I'm knocking at the park, and then you have a new manager that wants you to say, okay, yes, even though the title we hired you as is a BSA, but your work you're doing is a Scrum Master. Yeah, we want you to go back to that BSA type work.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, yes, I can't do that. And then there's that back and forth conflict. They're like, okay,
Yeah,
you don't really work for us, so
Yeah,
you know what? We're just gonna have to let you go.
I want to
Pretty
stick with
common
the.
too, though.
It is like
Sadly.
like that's
Unfortunately, that's what happened.
I would always try to lobby to align the job role or at least the title of the job with the expectation, because when you get too far from the expectation of the job, I've had the same thing. I've changed whatever reporting officials or bosses, whatever you want to call it, right? I've changed people on paper, right, where I do the same job theoretically, but now I'm working for a different department or a different boss or whatever, and
Not expected. to do
there's
something
different
different.
expectations, and that should happen. Different expectations. I feel like where Ohm started going into this category was he was talking about, well, to a company that doesn't understand the value of the role on paper in terms of money, they don't have a way to put value to this type of role. Capital One, for example, they said, well, the product owners on the team, the product managers will I don't know if the product owners are product managers. They said that the product owners will shoulder that responsibility, and that's fine for a short period of time. Okay. Show me on paper what the impact of having that one person do this dual role will be. Show me what the impact will be. The business case that I would try to represent if I was in the role of doing both of these responsibilities. First of all, I'd never be in that role because I would just leave. But if I was in that role, the business case that I would try to represent would be something along the lines of showing what we're missing out with regard to improved focus of the person or persons, highlighting what I can't get to while I'm doing all this team facilitation stuff as a product manager. I would approach it on the product side. I would say, because I'm doing all this team facilitation stuff, here are the things that I can't put my time into. I would like to be doing user journey maps. I would like to be working with sales. I would like to be going to every sales demo that the sales team is putting on to see how they demo the product. I would like to be working with marketing every time when they put together a new campaign and understanding how their metrics are rolling out and how what I'm doing in the product can impact what they're tracking. I would like to talk about the whole team facilitation side, because usually businesses don't understand what goes into team facilitation. What does that mean, team facilitation?
Well, you can't quantify it. That's the issue with facilitation, right?
Yeah.
You can't quantify it, and so people just basically pay lip service to it. Like, well, you're a developer, you speak well, you can facilitate anything.
Right.
You know, go to the G7 summit and go facilitate. No, people are not able to do that very effectively, right? So in this example that we are now talking about, management, possibly leadership, sought to save money, obviously, right, by collapsing these roles. Unfortunately, those people that were impacted, I'm guessing that they did not speak up and say, here's the opportunity cost, right? Yes, you can save money. So let's just draw two columns and go, here's the money savings, and here's the loss of productivity, loss of effectiveness. Now that second column is harder to quantify.
Yeah.
And what you need to do is work with your teams and say, what if there was no PO?
Right.
Or what if there was no fill in the blank, right? A Scrum Master for a sprint. What does that mean? So you extrapolate that out and you say, over a month, this is the amount of money in opportunity cost that we're losing, right? So you have two columns that one says how much you're saving, one says how much you're losing. And you do that for every element. And then at the bottom, you have a total, and it speaks for itself. So I think we're at that point in the podcast to say, if you're in this situation where, let's say, you have been tapped to play multiple roles.
Right.
So you're a Scrum Master and a PO, or you're a development team member and a Scrum Master, or a development team member and a PO, whatever combination thereof. How do you actually even begin to frame the challenges that you have? Right. You can say, oh, look, I'm overburdened.
That's not enough.
It's not enough. It's absolutely not enough.
Here's
How do you
the
do that?
problem. Here's the problem, right? The problem is, like I've said, I've played this role, so I know exactly where the problem is. When they interview you, sometimes they disclose that okay, they want you to play this role. So obviously, if they feel you don't have it, you're just not going to get hired.
But that's the easy path out of this. Like the more difficult path is you find yourself in the role, developer playing multiple roles or a scrum master and a PO together, you know what I mean, that kind of stuff. You find yourself in the role, and like, now how are you going to lobby the organization to say, look, like, you guys got to get me out of this. You got to separate the scrum master side, or, well, I guess it could be the developer saying, you guys got to separate this scrum master stuff from the team members. It needs its own person. We're doing so much coordination, so much breaking down the silos and stuff like that. You need a person to do this full time. Same thing with product. I think in small organizations where the developers are doing product, the developers could say, like, listen, like, you need people to coordinate with customers. You need people to
figure out pricing,
figure out your roadmap full time, figure out your marketing strategy full time. Like, I'm a developer. I can't do this anymore.
I think part of that, it goes back to what I was saying is, it doesn't matter what role you play, whether you're a development team member, product owner, scrum master. If you can come up with a way to quantify, because the only way to have this conversation with these management folks is in terms of what they understand, right? Which is dollars. The reason why why they're consolidating these roles is because they're either not wanting to spend the money or are wanting to save the money, right?
Yeah.
So create typically it's a spreadsheet, and put 2 columns on the spreadsheet. One is, this is the first column where enumerate everything you do, right? And try and say, well, it's a 2-week, let's say you're doing 2-week sprints. You say, how much time you're spending in hours? Your loading costs, right? Loaded costs per hour. If you don't know, it doesn't matter. Guess at it. And create that and say, I'm spending 4 hours every other day or whatever it is, right? So every activity is enumerated in that way. Then what you do is you create a second column, and then and underneath all of those activities, because they pertain to a role. Let's say you're a Scrum Master, they pertain to a Scrum Master role. And the ask is, they're wanting you to do a product owner role in addition to being a Scrum Master, let's say, for example. Mm-hmm. So underneath of all of those rows that enumerate Scrum Master responsibilities, you now put down all of those rows, additional rows, for product owner responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then you take a guess at how much time you think it's going to take you every day, right? But you do it for a sprint, because a sprint loaded cost is easier to calculate. So you do it that way. And then you say, for all of these, an additional ask is this. Why am I asking this to be a separate column? You may ask. Or you may not, but I asked. So the reason why is this. So you can actually show them front and back, if you like, right? So you can say, well, as a Scrum Master, I am doing all these things, and here is the loaded cost of the organization for me as a Scrum Master. And then likewise, having a second column allows you to do this and say, ditto for a product owner role. So a loaded cost for a product owner for a sprint is this. You can say a day, it doesn't matter. Right. Assuming all days are equal, right? All of that. Better. So you can say that. And then you can now go back armed with real information and have a conversation with your execs and say, a single person can do all of these things, but you look at all those hours, right? They add up to a lot more than 8 hours a day.
But again, how is this any different than you going to the product owner and be like, hey, I want you to build a website that does function A, and I want you to build a website that does function B, and then the product owner is like, great, which one do you want me to do first? No, both. I want you to do both of them.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to add to this, right? I had 2 columns, if those of you that are still with us recall. Add a third column.
Come back.
Call it opportunity cost. Okay, and then put in all of those things and say why you're not able to do all of those things that Brian just outlined. Everything we can do. We're human. We can do all of these things. You know, Steve Austin, right? We can rebuild him. Those of you that are 60 years old can relate to that. Anyway, the point is, if you have those 3 columns, you have numbers. When you have numbers, you have some basis to speak about these, and then you can go back and say, I just might want to remind you, I get paid for a 40-hour week.
Right.
And here we're looking at 68 hours a week.
Listen, I know you get paid for a 40-hour week on the podcast, but also you can only bill 40 hours regardless of how much time you turn in. If you're going through an approach to try to convince your company, this is the better way of doing things. Let me speak the language that you understand, which is financials. If you're unwilling to change your language to financials to make a breakthrough with the company, and maybe you can't do this at all when you're outside the company. Like if you're trying to get interviewed to go into a company, it may not be possible to do this unless you're talking directly to founders of the company or the CEO, right? Then maybe, yes, I will concede maybe it's not possible at all. But if you're inside, I would start with a phased approach to say that why don't we try this new program? Like usually companies can try to get dollars for a specific program or purpose or something. You know what I mean? They can do financial tricks to say, hey, we're going to fund this initiative. And then if it doesn't work, then it doesn't make profit, and they can do a tax write-off and stuff like that. Why don't we try a pilot program where we bring on a Scrum Master like role/job for contract for 6 months, 3 months, whatever it is. And we need some metrics to measure before and after the program. So before the program, we want to send out a survey, maybe an internal survey. How happy are you with the backlog? How happy are you with your interactions with this department or that department or this team or that team? How happy are you with the delivery speed of whatever? How happy are you with the quality of whatever? And then maybe we run that survey again after 3 months, after we have this person who's 3 months is probably a short amount of time. Maybe 6 months. Arguable, right?
Yeah.
But maybe if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to commit to hiring people or spending money, maybe you just spend some money on coaching to say, hey, maybe we can get somebody outside to come in and coach our teams. Maybe this person who's playing the dual role of product manager and also Scrum Master on the team, maybe we get somebody and spend a couple hours a week, an hour a week, 2 hours a week, whatever. Maybe just an hour one-on-one per week, just to talk about your problems. Hey, I'm having problems. Come
So we have
tell me about.
psychologists now.
Yeah, have a seat on the couch. Have a seat on the couch, Io. Tell me about your problems.
You're an agile therapist. Let me wrap up. If your favorite football team has a quarterback and a linebacker, and both of those guys are playing the same role, yeah, I'm just saying your team is probably not going to win the Super Bowl. But when they don't, introspect and figure out why. I think that's been the focus of this whole podcast is one person cannot be everything.
If you like this podcast, go to arguingagile.com. There's a form on the website, and also you can send us your voice messages and angry tweets. And also, if you'd like to hear more from us, you can hit us up on all of our social medias.